Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, find out what happens when the Internet Engineering Task Force is faced with the true reality. This hotel has bad Wi-Fi. Bits will roll. Plus, did you know AT&T Microcells have a backdoor built into their backdoor? We'll share the details with you, and we've got viewer feedback and a war story that's ripped straight from the headlines. All that and more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 52 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We streamed this one live on April 5th and released it for download on April 6th, 2012. This episode is brought to you by GoDaddy.com, and I'll tell you more about them as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by ScaleEngine.com, which was really quite fantastic. My name is Chris, and joining me like every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to episode 52. It marks our year.
Yes.
And I'm sitting in my
1 year
comfortable...
without missing...
What's that?
1 year without missing an episode.
That's right. That's right. This marks our 1 year streak, which is really the benchmark I like. This here is my comfortable episode 52 chair. So I got all kind of excited because I'm rolling comfortable. I busted this out of the audio studio because this is normally reserved for when the camera's off. But I said, no, today, on this 1 year episode, I'm going to sit in a comfy chair. And I know you're in your special chair. Yeah, you have a special chair. So before we get rolling, I wanted to just right off the top of the show, and sort of as a celebration of episode 52, last week during the feedback segment, we'd mentioned that we had a Zonotic server, you know, that really cool, free, open source first-person shooter. Well, it's not only now is it the #1 Zonotic server in the world, which is quite fantastic. I'm really pleased to say that. But we've got it all set up, and I released a video that gives you information about it since last TechSNAP. I did an in-depth look on our Zonotic server. You can go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, and it's still on the front page for a few more days. And check it out. It's got all the information in there. And we also have a thread over in the Jupiter Colony forum. There's a sub-thread for it. And it's just a great first-person shooter. You can check it out. I show some examples of gameplay in the video. And also, while you're over at Jupiter Broadcasting, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the site, past all those comments of everybody saying how much they love the server, you will notice that we have links down here for Amazon US, UK, Newegg, ThinkGeek, Best Buy, Mint.com, Audible.com, which I love, and this handy Chrome extension. If you click on any of those links before you shop or use that Chrome extension, then a portion of your shopping revenue will be donated to Jupiter Broadcasting. So you get yourself something and you get us something. So thanks, everybody.
And it doesn't cost you anything extra.
That's right. You help support these shows, and you help support the community things like the Zonotic server, which Alan has very gratefully donated as Scale Engine hosting for that. So you can go shoot people on running on Scale Engine, which is kind of cool. That's awesome. Well, man, we have a really big show, so I probably shouldn't putz around anymore because this first story is pretty... Well, actually, it kind of really... It upsets me because I was actually thinking about getting one of these AT&T micro towers because my reception for AT&T in my house is very low. So I was actually thinking about doing this, but now, after seeing this story, I have some second thoughts. Tell us what's going on.
Right. So some researchers got a hold of an AT&T microcell and tore it apart to see what it did, what was inside, and so on.
Yeah.
And they found that obviously AT&T has a backdoor in it.
Yeah.
But that there's an unintentional backdoor in their backdoor.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so even AT&T's backdoors have backdoors.
Oh, boy. Well, I'm sure it's nothing that I won't be gawking at, right? I'm sure it's nothing that I won't be face-palming over, right, Alan? Right?
So basically, a microcell is basically a little consumer device you would buy and put in your house or your business or whatever, and it increases the strength of your mobile internet connection. So everybody's cell phone signal strength goes up because basically it acts as a miniature cell tower in your house or business, and basically uses your broadband internet connection to connect back to whichever phone company, in this case AT&T, through a secure IPsec tunnel. So it uses your internet connection to boost your cell phone signal.
And they still actually, in some companies, not all of them, but some cell phone companies still make you pay for that, which is, I think, kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, usually you'd have to buy the device itself. That makes sense. But sometimes there's a subscription as well, yes.
Yeah.
And especially, well, if it's a business and you're trying to allow your customers to use their, if you're a coffee shop and people can't get a decent 3G signal. Of course,
Or,
why aren't they just using Wi-Fi? But still,
I worked at a location where their sales agents just needed better cell phone reception inside an old building that was really killed signal. So we had some of these throughout the building.
We actually thought of getting one for our old office because it was in a basement and had like no signal and would just eat the battery on your cell phone because your phone's trying to find the signal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, there's like, like I said, I was thinking about getting one here for the house because it's just, we don't really use our landline anymore. And since we're always on our cell phone, when the reception sucks, it's a real pain in the butt.
Yep.
So okay, how bad is this?
Yeah, so a little bit about the device first. The device is fairly complex and basically has two system on a chip, which is basically an entire computer on one chip instead of having to have a board and so on. So it has an Raylink and another Pico chip. Plus, it has a Linux FPGA processor as well.
Oh, okay.
And then a hardware radio and a GPS module.
Oh, GPS too.
Yeah. Well, because it uses the GPS for the radio timing. Basically, for the way cell phone radios work, the base station has to know exactly what time it is. Because a lot of things happen, every 10th of a second and so on. And you're scheduling things. And one of the things, your cell phone doesn't stay on all the time to catch stuff, right? It wakes up every so many milliseconds to check. And so everything has to be in sync.
Right.
So it uses the GPS for that, but also to know where the box is. Because AT&T also puts some rudimentary checking in there where the box can only be used inside an AT&T service area.
That seems arbitrary. I mean, you'd almost think you'd want the opposite. So you could have service where they don't have service.
Yeah, and it may be something about legal restrictions and stuff.
Oh, maybe, I bet.
Also be weird to like take your little AT&T self tower in a box over to like Europe
maybe
somewhere.
$50 you can get some AT&T. Pay me $50. I'm selling some AT&T signal.
Well, it would if you were traveling and you went somewhere, it's like using that to avoid roaming charges in your hotel room or something might be
I wonder
huge. Right?
The chat room, Vadus Prime in the chat room brings up a good point, and I wonder if there are issues with GPS signal indoors sometimes with this thing. Like, I wonder
most times GPS would have an issue there. I don't know exactly how it works. Now, it only needs some signal. I think you only need one GPS to be able to actually tell what time it is.
Oh, get time, right. Different requirements, sure.
And then the other one, obviously, if it doesn't know where you are, it's not going to likely shut you off or so on.
Yeah. Huh.
The device also includes a couple of anti-tamper features. When you take the case off, there's basically a set of 6 possible jumpers. And if they're not set right, then the device won't work. So they try to make it so that if you tear the device apart, it'll stop working. But the researchers have managed to figure out the one they have and think they've even figured out, even though each different device is supposed to be randomized because of those 6 different jumpers and they each have a number of possible settings, they think they've found a way to work around that so that, they wouldn't have to try to figure out what the exact code is for each device every time.
Right. If they can just bypass that or whatever they've figured out, then the code thing could be irrelevant completely.
Yeah. And then once they opened it up, they found a serial port for the Raylink processor.
Okay.
And basically by hooking up to that, they were able to watch the boot process and see what was happening.
Oh, fail.
And well, that's just normal, kind of. It's inside the box, so it's,
I guess, yeah, it's not like it's a port on the outside of the thing.
Right.
So at this point, you've opened it up, you've tampered with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they were able to interrupt the boot and be able to tell what some of the stuff was. It uses a bootloader called U-boot.
Oh, okay.
And then by learning a little bit about U-boot, they found that they could do MD to dump the memory, and basically were able to copy the entire flash memory from the processor over the serial console.
Wow.
So they can start, deconstructing the firmware.
Digging through that, yeah. Jeez.
So they were able to find out the Raylink system on a chip runs Linux kernel 2.6.21.
Okay.
Which contains a little LZMA compressed init-ramfs, which is basically the root file system. So it has a little image of the root file system that gets mounted read-write, but because it reads from a flash chip and loads that into RAM each time, you have a little ramfs that's read-write, but it would get cleared every time you rebooted it. You'd have to change the image in order to make it a change be persistent.
That probably makes sense. The operating system often expects the root file system to be writable, so you kind of avoid any kind of hangups from that.
Yep.
But you don't.
And then when you reboot it, everything goes back to normal.
Right.
And then
they just
if you do a firmware update, they would overwrite the image. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay.
So, but it doesn't really have any persistent storage, but it doesn't really need that.
Right.
The system also includes users for SSH and root, both of which have the same password. It's not a dictionary-based password, but after 5 days of cracking, they were able to crack the password.
And then they have both accounts, and so they have the root account.
Yeah.
Okay. It's getting bad. Okay, it's starting to get real bad.
So that allows them to log into the device via that serial console. But again, that's inside the device.
Right, okay. So as long as I don't open it, it's totally secure.
And then on top of all that, there's this system called the Wizard.
Oh, everybody loves the Wiz.
Basically, the main trick is that it provides a full backdoor to AT&T.
Oh, what a great name then.
Which allows for full, remote, unauthenticated root commands to be executed on the box. All you need to know is where to point your netcat command to send the commands to the Wizard.
Full unauthenticated commands. You execute something as root.
If you just send the command to a certain UDP port, it runs it.
Oh boy, that's quite the backdoor.
Now it's probably intended that Wizard thing only be able to be used over that secure IPsec tunnel that goes to AT&T.
Sure, that makes sense.
So, like normally this device wouldn't be directly exposed to the internet; it'd be behind your NAT router or whatever, right? Like you'd have at your house.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't be that vulnerable. And the idea is that this IPsec tunnel would connect out to AT&T, and AT&T could send commands back to your device to do things like upgrade it or monitor it or whatever.
Right. Okay.
It's fairly standard, although
yeah,
it probably should have some authentication. Although
seems a little intrusive.
The authentication would be the same on every device, and it would be built into your device. So if they tore it apart, they would have figured out the authentication key AT&T uses, making it just as useless as having none.
Mm-hmm.
But they should still have one. Just it looks better. I don't know.
Yeah.
So in other words, the microcell tunnels back home to AT&T, and that's where the commands would come from. However, when they set up the Wizard, they maybe unintentionally made it bind to 0.0.0.0, which on TCP/IP is basically an alias saying listen on every IP address on this machine. So rather than listening only on the IPsec tunnel, it also listens on the local WAN interface.
No.
So the backdoor is accessible over the WAN interface.
No.
So anybody on the LAN with it can send it commands.
Awesome. To the Wizard with full root.
Which will run them as root.
Brilliant.
So the backdoor uses simple UDP packets to transmit and receive the responses. So you send it a UDP packet and it sends one back.
Wow.
There are a number of different operations that they managed to figure out. The most useful one is called backdoor packet command line.
Oh, backdoor. They're just being pretty upfront about that, aren't they?
Backdoor packet command line, which is you send it a packet and through a backdoor it runs a command line.
Oh my God, this is ridiculous.
The command is actually called backdoor.
You know what this sounds like? It sounds like the script to 24, and where the technical writing is just a little off, and they just couldn't quite get it right. It's so ridiculous. I cannot believe this. I mean, this
stuff was never meant to be seen by anybody other than AT&T. But
making that kind of assumption is a bit ridiculous.
I know, but also, wouldn't you just call it packet command line or something, or like admin override command line or something? You just
technical service command line. Yeah. The mind is boggled.
The command lets you execute any Linux command using a backtick type function, just like you would do at the Linux shell with the backtick operator.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So the response packets to the UDP commands it receives are hard coded to go back to a UDP address 234.2.2.7, which is I think that's multicast address at AT&T that would only be accessible over that IPsec tunnel. So even if you send it a command over the WAN, it would actually send the response to AT&T. So you wouldn't be able to see the response of what you did.
Do you think maybe AT&T did that on purpose then for troubleshooting purposes or something?
Possibly. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But again, they probably intended this never to be used over the WAN, only over the IPsec tunnel anyway. But in order to get around this, because they had root access on their device, they set up a little IP tables firewall rule that redirects packets destined to AT&T to go to their own host, so they would be able to see the responses to the commands they were sending the cell tower.
Well, that's clever.
Yeah, so you've had some pictures of the device, and we got a link here to the full analysis of what they found about it, and I'm sure they'll keep updating that as they find more.
Yeah, they said, I think They sort of implied by when I was going through this, it looks like they're going to do a series of posts on this. One specifically more about that whole wizard backdoor system.
Yeah.
Wow,
But,
Alan.
As far as I can tell, there's nothing there that would immediately allow me to compromise the one that if you have one at your house, I wouldn't be able to just take it over.
Right.
But if I was at your house, then I would.
And it seems, too, that if you could get root level access like that, you could even get to a point where you could probably install software. Like, why couldn't you send commands to FTP something down and then send commands to install that something and then run software on it?
They don't have very much space, I don't think. But yes, you probably could. And, you know, the eventual idea here is maybe you would be able to make it sniff other people's phone calls. So if one of these installed at your local coffee shop or something, and you go down there, you can send it a couple of UDP packets, make it install some listening software that captures everybody's phone calls before it goes across.
Remember that story we covered where they can break text on these things, text messages?
Yeah. And basically, so I imagine this thing, so it would receive the signal from everybody else's cell phone in the area and send a copy of it to you before it sent it on to AT&T over the tunnel.
I think I like the direction the chat room is going in. I think what AT&T ought to do is embrace this and let you install apps on your microcell. Like I could install a Google Voice app. Maybe I could even install enough apps to make it like a little PBX. That'd be great. Put asterisks on that thing.
These are fairly limited processors that aren't going to unstock software very well.
Oh, Alan, that's called humor. A story with a humorous climax. That's what that was. It was a joke. I was just kidding. But it would be a little cool, like DDWRT, one of those things. I'm just, spitballing, Alan. Just throwing it out there into the universe. Maybe the universe is going to pick it up. Should we move on to the next story?
Sure.
All right. So this story I have absolutely no foreknowledge of, but it seems like it could be a very good move by the FTC. What's going on?
Right. So there's a website called rockyou.com, and it was a social gaming website. Back in late 2009, they had a massive security breach and exposed 32 million users' email addresses and passwords and so on.
Oh.
The critical part of the story is that the passwords were stored in plain text.
Oh, 32 million passwords stored in plain text.
With the email addresses.
What an F up. Holy crap.
And it was one of the largest breaches of plain text passwords like this. And it kind of resulted in some interesting studies by people of what people's passwords look like.
Right.
Because when we saw some analysis with like the Gawker database, but they could only look at the passwords that they could crack, right? Because they were just plain MD5. So it took a little time, but they managed to crack a good chunk of the passwords, but not all of them.
Yeah.
When you have the database in plain text, you would get to see the strong passwords as well as the weak ones instead of only the weak ones. And so you can do more analysis on what makes a strong password and are these passwords, some of them maybe are not actually that strong, but they just fall just far enough outside of the norm that they don't get picked up by the first pass and so on.
32 million is a pretty good amount of sample data.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's so now the FTC is getting involved somehow with this?
Well, there's a couple of things that resulted in the FTC getting involved.
Okay.
The first issue that exacerbated the problem was that 179,000 of the accounts belonged to minors under the age of 13.
Oh, okay.
And that data was collected in violation of U.S. COPA laws. Right? If you're going to collect data from a user under the age of 13 or under, you have to get permissions from their parents first, and it has to be like reliably provable permission from their parents or something like that.
Okay.
Also, you have to have a very clear policy for your privacy policy and how the data gets shared and stuff about advertisers and so on. And they didn't have any of that. They were just collecting data from minors without following these laws.
They hate that.
Yeah. The site was the RockU site was compromised with a fairly trivial basic SQL injection. And just caused it to start returning everybody's username and password.
Come on.
Yeah. Now, what the STC, the Federal Trade Commission, specifically took issue with was that on rockyou.com's website, they had a number of claims about their security and privacy. So they said, we take your privacy very seriously. We do this and that when you're all protected and you're safe. Meanwhile, they're storing your password in plain text.
Wow.
And are wide open to SQL injection.
These guys almost should get nominated into the Hall of Shame.
Yeah, they probably should. So basically, as part of the settlement with the FTC, RockU.com has been barred from making future deceptive claims about user privacy and data security. Because that was specifically, it's basically false advertising when you say we protect your data and then you don't.
Right.
They also must submit to third-party security audits every second year for the next 20 years.
Ouch.
Yeah. They also have to delete all user data illegally collected from minors and pay a $250,000 civil fine.
So $250,000. So we're talking about, think about this in real world terms. Like, to bring this home, I think of Jupiter Force. Like, what if we had somebody sign up under the age of 13 for Jupiter Force? What kind of regulations are we possibly subject to? Is that any kind of
as part of the registration system in the forum, there's a big COPA thing already in there.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure we just don't allow anyone under 13 to register. So when you enter your birth date, if it's less than 13, we say, sorry,
no thanks. See, what I just think about is I just see like community sites that just crop up and don't really think about these implications and then get big and then all of a sudden violate these kinds of rules and get met with like $250,000 fine.
Mostly they went after them because of these false claims they were making.
Yeah, that's D-bag.
Don't claim your site is secure when it's not.
Yeah, they were total D-bags when it came to that. I agree. That's fair.
But also, yes, the COPA is a U.S. law, and it has been since like 1998 or something. Most online forums have this kind of stuff built in, and so you have to be cognizant of it.
Interesting, though, to see the FTC. I mean, that's a pretty big crackdown. An audit every 2 years.
The Jupiter Force website is hosted in Canada.
Oh, score! Sweet, we're safe. We're good. Although then SOPA could take us down.
Possibly. We have a PDF of the full settlement details from the FTC, so you can read all about exactly what happened and what the different.
So you got to be hardcore if you want to read that thing. But I guess again, if you run a site that has minors, you probably want to go check that out.
Well, this is also just about storing data in plain text and so on.
I mean, that is right there the Hall of Shame.
In the article we linked to for this story is from ZDNet. At the end of the article, they have a little quote that I want to nitpick at.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
They said, they're like, if your password's on this list or anywhere close to what's on this list, go change it. But then they also said, if you store your customer's data in plain text, please go encrypt it. So they added that at the end of their story, trying to be helpful.
Right.
But they're actually propagating bad information. Passwords should not be encrypted. Passwords should never be encrypted.
Right, because that means you can decrypt it, right?
Yes. Encryption is reversible. It means basically when you encrypt something, it requires a key, whether that's a password or a big, long string or whatever, right? But it means with regular symmetric encryption, you need the same password to decrypt it.
Right.
And the problem with that is the server needs the password in order to encrypt new passwords when somebody else signs up or changes their password. If the server has the password to decrypt it, if I compromise that server, then I can get that password as well.
Right.
Right? So you're providing almost no extra security.
Yeah.
Whereas if you use hashing, which is one-way encryption, where the string can never be decrypted, only brute force, which takes a lot more effort, it means that it's not possible to get the original password back. So instead, you should be using a cryptographically secure hashing algorithm.
Right.
Something like salted SSH256 or blowfish hash or something to that effect. We've covered this before.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, Alan's not a doctor, but he recommends salting your passwords.
Right.
Salt your hash.
Plain MD5, definitely not good enough. You can get rainbow tables for that and crack those in no time. That's what happened to Gawker. Even regular MD5 hashes are really not strong enough anymore. People with using old Bitcoin rigs or any, video card machines can crack through MD5 passwords really quickly.
Yeah. There's probably some spare Bitcoin hardware floating around these days.
Yeah, we did an episode about that not that long ago. And so that's why you should use a secure hashing algorithm like SSH256. Now, again, not just plain SSH256 and not your own algorithm where you add a salt to it, but you need a cryptographically secure hashing algorithm.
It's not hard, people. Everybody loves hash and everybody loves salt. Two great things.
They're basically, support is built in to the crypt command in Linux for this stuff from now on, basically. And even like if you're writing code in like PHP, the built-in PHP crypt command supports SSH256 and blowfish.
Right.
You don't try to make your own.
Right.
Use the standard stuff.
Oh my gosh, Alan, I've been working with this guy who is a longtime friend, and he had a buddy bail on him on a project. So he called me up and said, "Can you come in this week and help me out for a day? I'm in the middle of a massive migration." He is dealing, I can't give away too many details, but they are dealing with these very large, complicated scan images that are from these huge printout sheets. And the guy that developed the system is storing them in some sort of proprietary TIFF format that he sort of convoluted on his own. And I tell you, whenever these guys, and he invented so many of these own things, whenever you come across this kind of stuff, it just is such a long-term killer. I mean, it is such a killer. Go standards, just use the stuff that's built in. It's updated, it's supported by the community. I mean, it's just the way to go. It's a no-brainer. You know what else is a no-brainer, Alan? That would be GoDaddy.com. And I want to say thank you to GoDaddy for supporting TechSNAP. Now, this is a great example. When you're working on a project, do me a favor. Don't screw the future technician that's going to show up and fix everything after you burn out and leave. Do me a solid. Use something that is an industry standard. Use something like GoDaddy.com. That way, when I have to go work on their DNS records or work on their hosting or work on whatever it is, set up a reverse MX, whatever, I want it to be something that's industry standard, that's easy to support on the long term, and that is GoDaddy.com. And we have got some great deals for you right now. If you use the code 599COM7, let's see, 599COM7 when you check out, you can get a domain, a .com for $5.99, and you can get up to 5 of them, each $5.99. And then also, if you use the code SPRING7, like you're doing some spring renewals or some spring hosting, SPRING7 will save you 15% on anything you order at GoDaddy.com. So
Nice.
Thank you to GoDaddy for giving us some great promos. Those are good until the end of the month, folks. So use them while we got some. And supporting TechSNAP is a great way to do that is by supporting GoDaddy, because they are not only just supporting this show, but also the Linux Action Show. And they've been great supporters of Jupiter Broadcasting for a long time. So we're glad to have them on board. All right, Alan, I think it's time for the TechSNAP feedback.
Yep.
And thanks for sending your email to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Alan, we've got 2 feedback emails we're going to cover this week and a war story. Are you ready for the first one?
Mm-hmm.
It's really just more of a FYI out there, especially for our viewers over in the UK. Andy wrote in from the UK and he said, could you guys get the word out about this e-petition? Now, I'm not usually a big believer in petitions, but I am a big believer in just spreading the word. Essentially, I don't understand a lot about it.
This one's hosted by the UK government. It's not just some random petition site. It's actually
it is sort of like the one the White House set up, I guess, sort of like one of those go vote on this. So yeah, it does carry a little more weight. This new law aims to monitor calls, texts, emails, and web history of UK users. It's essentially a very out in the public version of what I would say a lot of people consider the U.S. Patriot Act. So welcome to the club, guys. Now, this hasn't been passed yet, and of course, government officials are out in force saying, well, we're not going to ram it through. We're going to talk about this and really give it some discussion. But BBC is covering it, but there's not a lot of really technical details on how this would work yet. But I think it's definitely something that people should know about. So we will have a link in the show notes where you can sign that government petition to say you are against that. And Andy just wanted us to pass that along because he knows we hate that kind of crap.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Was it Andy or was it Luke? It was Luke.
It was Luke. Andy's the next question.
Andy's the next question. Andy wrote in, and it's a great question. Andy writes, here's my setup first, guys, so you have the background. You guys have both talked about large storage servers. I think he's resisting saying big data there. Alan has his BSD9 ZFS box, and Chris has a media server that he's building. I also have a really big storage server for the networks videos that I haven't talked about. I'm currently hosting remote backup for some of my clients and some of their clients' servers, and I'm adding more and more storage to meet their needs. I'm also looking at doing some other projects that will end up producing lots of data on client servers, as well as my own. Here's the question, Alan. How do you guys cope with having such large amounts of data, and how do you back that up, or do you? I would love to hear some creative ideas for backing up large. I'm talking multiple terabytes of data, and I also think it would be valuable to look at this from the servers in your home or office type perspective, and also if it's maybe a scenario for a remote data center type server. Thanks again for putting such awesome show packed full of good stuff, and having it pop up my podcast feed always gets me excited, and I find time to listen to it. He says he could listen to this show all day long, and I could do this show all day long. It's just I don't think Alan could.
Well, we've done the show all year long now.
That's true. That's true. So what do you think, Alan? What do you do to back up these really large data sets that you have?
We have basically in our ZFS array, we have a number of different areas. Some of them are important. And so we have we use Bacula to back them up to another server in the same data center. And that's storing them that one just uses an array of regular UFS disks. It's not using a fancy anything like ZFS.
Okay.
Then we have a second ZFS server that doesn't have nearly as much space as the main one. But basically, there's a certain volume from our ZFS array that has important files on it. And we actually use the ZFS replication system.
Oh, nice.
Called ZFS send and ZFS receive. And basically, we take a snapshot of that every hour and transfer just the changes between the last snapshot and this snapshot to the other server over the LAN.
So that's a little more manageable since you're just moving deltas instead of all of the terabytes of files.
And it's a smaller data set. Like there's only like 200 gigabytes of data there.
Sure.
That are being replicated.
Sure.
The main content, the video stuff, that we don't back up because, backing up video is hard because it doesn't compress at all.
Because usually it's already stored compressed.
Mostly, we're not the authoritative source for that video, right? Somebody made that video and then uploaded it to us.
Yeah.
So they have the authoritative copy.
Right.
And so we have the ZFS Z2 array, which is giving us double redundancy. So the chance of losing the data due to a single hard drive failure is 0, and even double hard drive failure is 0.
Right.
If someone accidentally deletes it, sorry, we can't get it back for you. You're supposed to have a copy of that. So we don't back up the large video data, but most of the other data we back up normally with something like Bacula, which again is doing deltas to avoid having to transfer a lot of data.
Sure.
And the other thing is Bacula can do what's called a virtual backup. So what it does is normally you would take a full backup of everything, and then you do your differentials once a week and a daily once a day or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or an incremental once a day. You can take a bunch of those diffs and merge them with a full to make a new full.
I like that.
So instead of having to do a complete full backup once a month, you can actually just make an incremental full by merging all the changes together.
That's really sweet.
So, which, if you're doing a remote backup, makes a really big difference. Like, we started using that for our main web server that we use for all of our old clients from before Scale Engine.
Mm-hmm.
It has, 50 gigabytes of data, and backing up 50 gigabytes on the first Sunday of every month was a giant waste of bandwidth, and it slowed the server down as it read all the data.
Sure, yeah. It's a big job.
So instead, we just do the differential every week, and we only do a full backup once a quarter. And then once a month, we actually just merge a bunch of the diffs together to make a new full. And mostly that's just so that we can delete the older diffs to save space. Because a lot of those diffs, if a file changes every day, it's in every single backup.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to keep every single copy of it. So by merging those, you can end up saving space without having to do another full backup.
Absolutely. That's nice and handy.
And it allows us to basically supersede our older volumes so they can be overwritten. So basically, ZFS replication for important stuff, Bacula backup for stuff where you need more than just high availability. You need archival copies of it if you need to be able to go back in time by 6 days. Now again, ZFS can do that again with snapshots as well, though. So we're getting part of that with the ZFS snapshots, because basically we're replicating snapshots rather than the live file system.
Right.
And then some of the data we just don't back up.
Now, I have been challenged because the Jupiter Broadcasting show archive of the final high resolution H.264, so they're already compressed versions. Just that alone is 468 gigabytes. So what I do is I archive those onto a Drobo, and then I try to once a year swap out the disks and then store them and then replicate them. So it basically on the Drobo you can pull out a disk, you pop in a new disk, and it mirrors. And then after that's done, you can pop out that disk and pop in another disk and it mirrors, and then you can take the whole set and you take it off site. The problem is it's very time consuming and it's very expensive, so I haven't done it this year. So it's not a very good plan.
That one also is hard to tell if everything's exactly how it should be on there as well.
Right. It's more of here's an end of the year snapshot. And every year the archive just gets bigger and bigger because it's just everything we've ever done. And what we did for my wife Angela with her large photo libraries, we went with something like Crash Plan that had an unlimited offsite storage and just let it go for days and days and days.
Well, the issue with the way you're doing it with the Drobo there is you need a Drobo to be able to read that data back, right?
Yep.
It's because Drobo has a kind of proprietary file system.
Yeah. I now see the nice thing is if you have a newer Drobo, and you have like the very first original Drobo, which is my scenario. They both still work with both sets.
Right.
It's just the original one's very slow. So in a recovery situation, you're restoring all that 468 gigabytes at 10, 11 megabytes a second. So it just takes freaking forever.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't really have a great solution because it's hard to get that much data off-site. I've got local backups here, and I have stuff stored on redundant disks. But if my house were to burn down, I would be SOL.
Yeah.
So it's a tough call, and you have to find it works for each environment has its own scenario. Like the people I were talking about earlier that have the proprietary TIFF format, they also just set up a bunch of rsync scripts to just mirror to large data pools on different servers, and they just copy between the two servers, and that's their approach. So,
but yeah, remote backup can be especially challenging, especially if individual places have a lack of bandwidth. Right? Like, we have a couple of remote backup clients that are like little offices or whatever, and they just have a DSL connection, and they can't send us a lot of data very easily.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't be doing it during business hours because we don't want to slow down their internet. And so it's like, if we're only allowed to run during these hours and you only have this much bandwidth, it will take 2 months to transfer all your data to us.
I tried to suggest a crash plan to sponsor, because one of the things I liked that they did, and this would be really good for my media collection, because my media collection is terabytes and terabytes, is they let you send them a hard drive. So you could send them a volume. Now, they do charge like $100 for this, but then they copied all that to their system, and then you just send them the deltas from then on and remotely.
That's a good way to get started.
Yeah, but you have to pay that $100 fee. Plus, you essentially have to send them your drives, and they have to send them back and all that. But it's kind of an interesting approach. Well, Alan, but I think that's all the feedback we have, but we do have a war story. Do you want to get to the war story?
Sure.
Now, do I need to read a part, or am I just color commentary?
Not really.
Peanut Gallery it is. You got it, sir.
This is not the same as our usual war story. It was just a news thing that came up that I kind of morphed into a war story slightly.
Oh, no, I like this. So this is from a current event kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
So last week was the Internet Engineering Task Force meeting. It's like their 83rd meeting.
Right.
So a bunch of all the people for the Internet Engineering Task Force show up for a conference at their hotel and find that the wireless and wired networks are quite flaky. Like 30% packet loss and 5 and 6 second ping times.
Kind of ironic a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. So all these major players in the Internet Engineering Task Force, so these are people that do the internet for a living, they show up in Paris for this meeting and find that the hotel's Wi-Fi network is basically unusable.
That sucks.
And the wired network is not much better, and is further exacerbated by the fact that all the in-room TV systems use the wired Ethernet for their data connection.
Oh, man. So they're just sitting there probably spamming.
Right. So the TVs are streaming the data.
Yeah.
And, I'm guessing that their network is only 100 megabit.
Right. So they're just totally just taking over the whole network with just handling that traffic. Yeah. And of course, who knows how many TVs they have in a hotel like that? So
this hotel's, from what I've read, is at least like 35 stories tall or higher than that.
I watched they probably linked the switches just like with the Cat5 cable to each floor or something.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of funny quotes on this one. Ben Campbell from the Internet Engineering Task Force noted that I've got looks like a pretty good 802.11 connection, but I'm seeing about 30% packet loss, and it's not really usable from my room in the way that it's working right now.
So can you imagine calling the front desk and be like, yeah, hi reception, I'm having packet loss, and then that conversation goes over real well.
They're like, you lost your packet?
Are you talking about your luggage, sir? Did your luggage get misplaced?
Did you have a parcel?
Yeah.
And then someone else was like, there's no Wi-Fi signal when I'm at the desk in front of the window in my room.
Like the working spot, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, every hotel room has a little desk by the window where you could sit to work. And, sometimes that's where the Ethernet jack for your laptop and everything will be.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's no Wi-Fi at the desk. But after some experiments, I discovered that the signal is quite good if you're on the ceiling of the...
There you go. Nice.
If you're on the ceiling of the bathroom.
Okay.
All right. On the ceiling of the bathroom, there's a good Wi-Fi signal.
So he's like walking around holding up his laptop. He's like, oh, there's some signal.
Well, he was using his cell phone in this case.
Oh, okay.
So he found what his solution was he took his Google Nexus S and taped it to the ceiling of the bathroom and then tethered to it over Bluetooth.
Wow, that is a man who is hard up for some internet. That's what that is.
Yep.
Wow.
And then they also noted that the hotel was having power problems with all their network equipment above the 27th floor.
Surprise, surprise. I'm sure then the TV services sucked too.
Yeah.
The networkworld.com ran an article on this too. So now the hotel has just totally got egg on their face.
Mm-hmm. But being the Internet Engineering Task Force, they decided to engineer some internet.
Nice. Good boys.
So the attendees negotiated with the hotel and eventually were given access to the network infrastructure.
That's too funny.
And basically the IETF Makeover team made a number of changes to the hotel's wireless network.
Wow. Well, hey, they got some free consulting. At least I assume it's free.
Yeah. So first thing they did was decrease the access points receiver sensitivity. So they had some big commercial HP network access points, but they were all set for large area.
Yeah.
And
So
the
they're
hotel's
blowing
actually
each
a more
other out.
confined area. So they switched all the settings from large to small.
Nice.
They increased the minimum data and multicast rates from 1 megabit to 2. They decreased the transmit power on all the access points from 20 decibels to 10. Because again, the most people assume just jack up the power and you'll get a better signal.
Right.
But when you have the access points too close together, then they're talking over top of each other. And in that zone where they're overlapping, you get no signal.
Right.
And then they actually started turning certain access points off because they were just causing more noise than being useful.
When I worked at the school district, I believe we had a wireless system we were implementing called Aruba. Does that ring a bell? And the one of the catches of this Aruba system is that every wireless access point would be Ethernet wired back to a controller, and it would make sure and monitor that none of the wireless access points were really stepping over each other. So if one went down, it would increase others in the area to fill the gap. And then when it came back online, it would decrease the other ones automatically to make sure that service would not be interrupted. It was a really slick system.
Yeah. So they used the program NetDisco to basically discover the current network and map MAC addresses to IP addresses and figure out what was connected to what port number and so on to try to map out the network because, they're just a bunch of people showing up at a hotel. They don't know how the network's set up.
Right.
And then they used a program called Rancid to basically set up a CVS repository of the configs on all the access points and their changes.
This is awesome. These guys just totally broke it
so
down.
they wouldn't undo each other's changes and so on.
This is great. This is a pro operation. They come in there, they do discovery, they do repair, and they do documentation and configuration management.
They established a little makeshift NOC to manage the network.
Wow. This is how the Internet Task Force does business, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then there were also problems caused by the fact that the people coming to the conference were from all over the world. Basically, in different countries, they have different laws about the spectrum of RF signals you can use.
Uh-huh.
So basically, Wi-Fi has a certain number of channels. I think it's up to 16. I forget. But each country has a different range of which channels are allowed.
Right.
For example, in the US, I think it's 1 to 12.
Yeah, or something.
I forget what the different ones are. But different countries have different channels. Like there's certain channels that can only be used in Japan. But basically, there are some channels that are allowed in France, but not allowed in the USA.
Right.
And vice versa.
Right.
So specifically, Macs from the US won't use Wi-Fi channel 13 because that's not allowed in the US.
So they have it disabled in the firmware or something, huh? Or in the driver?
And, the IETF has argued with Apple about this before, saying it should be up to the access point to say what's allowed.
You'd think so, right? You'd think of the access point, whatever it negotiates, the client should just do.
Yes, that's how it works on every other Wi-Fi controller, but the Mac one won't use channel 13.
Huh.
For some reason.
That's stupid.
And basically, so that meant that, that which is a perfectly open channel in France wasn't open to people using US-based Mac devices. But because there was a couple of channels they could use, it wasn't a big deal. It just meant that people that had European machines that could use channel 13 had a bit of a speed advantage.
Oh, sure.
So they could use that channel when some of the Americans couldn't.
Right. A wide open lane.
Yeah. So later on, after the situation was less critical and had stabilized somewhat, and they had a better understanding of the existing network, they came up with a plan to basically re-engineer the whole network. So the first goal was get it working so that we can, do our regular stuff. right? Because we're supposed to be trying to have a conference here. But after that, they're like, let's actually come up with a plan and fix this network. So then what they did is each floor would now have approximately 2 access points on each of 4 different Wi-Fi channels. And they'd be staggered with the adjacent floors to try to maximize the distance between any 2 access points that were on the same channel so they wouldn't talk over each other.
Wow. I mean, this is so funny. Like, when some people go to a conference in Paris, they go out drinking, they go to the Eiffel Tower, they see the sights. These guys, they completely re-engineer the hotel's Wi-Fi.
Yeah. That's what I would do if I was So
wow.
This is, we hope this will significantly improve the coverage in some rooms that had marginal or no signal, while also improving the signal-to-noise ratio for everyone. In addition, he switched a couple of the single radio access points on each floor to use 5 gigahertz. So not everybody's laptop would support 5 gigahertz, right? Because that would be for wireless N.
Yeah.
At least some of those people could use that and make this less crowded band. So that
nice.
would leave more on the 2.4 gigahertz, and anybody who could use N would get the better speeds as well.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there you go. Okay. That's pretty interesting. That's an interesting real world war story.
They showed what should have been done when it was set up originally.
Yeah.
They said it was hampered by the fact that the hotel doesn't have their own IT staff at all. They just had some contractor come in and install this Wi-Fi and leave, right?
Yeah.
And they seemed to be kind of amateurish and just like, well, if we jack up the power on all these access points, people will get good coverage.
Right. Well, I think it's the direction. I mean, I did it early on with Wi-Fi when I thought I wasn't getting enough signal. Well, just turn it up. And of course, as you start to realize there's more to it than just that.
Yeah. So, and basically, when they had spotty signal, they're like, well, we'll just throw in more access points.
Yeah.
Which isn't always the right solution.
Throw in more access.
Basically, you need to do a proper site survey where you actually start putting in the access points and then finding the dead zones and finding out why they're dead and then solving it.
Otherwise, you're going to have guests taping their cell phones to
the ceiling of the bathroom and then Bluetoothing tethering so that they can use their laptop to check their email.
That's sad. That's sad. All right, Alan.
They said that the hotel blocked an inordinate number of ports. It almost seemed like they blocked everything and only allowed certain things. And it was causing problems because almost everyone that works at the IETF wants to VPN out rather than using the hotel's wireless.
Right. That's always the thing. Always the thing.
Want that encryption, right? So everybody wanted to VPN out and a lot of it was getting blocked. And, apparently they were even blocking the most instant messenger protocols. And like people from Cisco are like, what are you doing?
I see that's more and more common. I mean, I wish that was less common than it really is.
The Internet Engineering Task Force are like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I know.
It's like, we're following security best practices.
I have some guys that these guys should call up and try to reconvince too, because it's just ridiculous what some companies out there do. Now, we have a link in the show notes to the full 4-page write-up that came out of this. It's pretty interesting stuff. Anything else on that?
Nope, that's about it.
All right, well, very interesting real-world war story taken right out of current events, but I do believe it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. And welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that we're going to kind of jam through a little faster. They're almost always supplied by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And they're typically stories that we just didn't quite fit into the top of the show. We still wanted to cover and give you links to maybe read a little more on your own. Alan, are you ready for our first Roundup story this week?
Yes.
All right, this one's pretty interesting. It comes out of Google, and it's not even an April Fool's joke. It's called Project Glass. And it's Google goggles, but now Google already has goggles. But this is actually, they're claiming to be a pair of glasses that you'll put on your face and walk around and get heads-up real-time information about crap you're looking at, reminders, everything.
Augmented reality, it's called.
Yeah, augmented reality. Yeah, what do you think of this? Do you think it's vaporware?
It looks pretty cool, and it's, future-facing, and this is classic Google. This is the kind of Google we like.
Yeah, totally,
Rather than, I saw an ad on television the other day for G+, and I was like, really? You're advertising Google Plus on TV?
Wow, really? Which is interesting, too, because isn't Google an internet advertising company? Ha, ba-dum-bum. So this thing claims, like heads-up GPS navigation, reminders, instant messaging while you're walking around, identification of objects. I like the idea of it for walking instructions.
Yeah. And,
what do you think?
It's good future-facing stuff. Yeah. And, but they didn't say that it's something that they plan to sell next month or anything.
No, and it does just look like mostly like a CG mock-up to me.
Yes, but, it's the cool stuff. We always talk about what happened to all that cool stuff they said we were going to get in the 60s or whatever.
Right.
This is getting back to that. And
It
actually,
very much is.
Looking practically at, Google has all the stuff it needs. It just needs to figure out how to hook it together and to make it work in glasses.
I think, yeah, that's true. They do have like all the back end stuff to this. I think what they need is like some sort of system where I guess you could just not wear them. I was just thinking you definitely would need like a do not disturb mode. So that way you could hit the button, not have all this crap pop up for a little bit, hit the button again, information comes down. Like, if you're traveling, I could see these would be very, very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is there you go. That's our first story in the roundup, I guess. We'll leave it at that. Now, this next story on the roundup.
Cool video if you want to check it out.
Yeah, that's true. Not everybody listens. Not everybody's watching the video version, but we just showed a video. Now, this next story: details of an FBI surveillance of LulzSec. The takedown emerge.
Right. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but we got a lot more detail now. If you want to actually know what happened and why they let it go on so long and so on, a bunch of the details are in this story here.
They say yesterday we learned that one of the top members of LulzSec, this was, I guess, a little old. No, not really. Oh, it is a little old. They said they had him for almost 6 months, and they go through some of the timeline, and it's an interesting story.
Yep.
I read into some of it, too, and yeah, the timeline is very interesting about how it all went down, and it is a very... I don't know what to make of it as a person who doesn't really understand how federal investigations go, and how much went down under the watch of the FBI is pretty striking. But this is an interesting story, one we don't usually talk about, and that's Mac security. There's a story in the roundup this week, and it was all over our subreddit, and the press is covering it like this. 600,000 Macs are infected around the globe with a botnet.
One specific botnet includes 600,000 infected Macs, and apparently, other machines as well.
That's what they say. I don't know if I buy it, to be honest with you.
Why not?
I don't know this Dr. Web company. It's some Russian antivirus company reporting this. It's called Dr. Web. I don't know. That just sounds a little suspicious.
Their numbers could be slightly exaggerated, but they have a certain sample size, and it's like X of X Macs are infected, therefore.
Well, and the other thing is, it's called a new variant of the flashback Trojan, and the original flashback Trojan, I got a link to it here. What it was more of like a monitor your websites you go to and capture your logins. It wasn't so much a botnet. So now they're saying it's a variant of flashback, but it's a botnet.
Right, but that would have to have been a botnet for it to report that data back.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. I guess if they sent it back,
since it's already connected, that means they can issue commands to make your machine do something else.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're going to want you to do, but they will send you a command at some point, and your machine will start doing something.
The ludicrous part of this is that it's exploiting a flaw in Java that the other operating systems have had to patch out for a long time, that Oracle has already patched. But the way Apple does it, now I think this is changing, but the way Apple does it currently is Apple takes the Java runtime and repackages it and updates it itself through their OS updater mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's transitioning to be dealt by Oracle, but so right now I believe the onus falls on Apple for fixing this, and the fact that it's super old like this is something they really need to jump on.
Yeah, so basically Apple wasn't quick enough turning around Oracle's fix for Java, and so now all these Macs are infected.
And it's funny too, because they're working on this walled garden, what do you call it sandbox. They're going to sandbox the apps from the Mac App Store. But this wouldn't have protected from that at all, because Java and Flash and those types of things aren't from the Mac App Store, so they wouldn't have been sandboxed. So it seems to be Apple's going after a model.
Java itself is a sandbox, and this exploit is what's breaking out of the sandbox. So.
Right. But I guess what I'm saying is Apple seems to be focusing maybe in the wrong spot for their OS security, because they're really only protecting people from App Store apps, and they're not really protecting people from apps that are downloaded on the internet, and they're just kind of going to say, well, that's, if you got it from the internet, well, that's your own fault. I just don't think, I think it's irresponsible as an operating system vendor. That's just my opinion, though. Because,
But I know Adobe's working on a bunch of changes to the Adobe Air platform so that the apps can go into the Mac App Store.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Really?
Because they have to meet that sandboxing requirement.
Didn't you see a story, too, that Adobe's introducing automatic updating to Flash in the future?
Yes. When you install the newest version of Adobe Flash 11.2, you'll get a prompt asking if you want it to silently install all future updates rather than nagging you all the time. Because a lot of people were complaining about the pop. Every time you reboot, it seems like there's a pop-up saying your Flash needs updating.
Yeah, no kidding.
So it basically offers you the option to have it done automatically if you want.
That's cool.
Or you
Or
you can say, just check and tell me every time there's an update, or don't bother checking for updates. And since it gives you that control, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. I might actually do it on some of my machines.
Yeah.
All right. So last week, was it? We talked about a story, or a couple of weeks ago, where it was, I think, a story talking about how foreign governments wanted to use, or our government wanted to use, the U.S. government wanted to use consoles to retrieve user data off of them. Wasn't that what the story was?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You don't remember?
Anyway.
Wasn't there? Didn't we cover a story about somebody was taking used consoles and trying to get data off of their hard drives? Come on, we talked about that on the show.
Nope.
All right. Well, cool. So this
I don't remember anyway.
All right. I was going to make a segue from that to this story, but let's cover. So now we have another story in the roundup regarding the Xbox.
So it basically turns out that your Microsoft Xbox logs your credit card details to its hard drive when you enter them. Mostly this is because, entering a credit card using a console controller is kind of tedious, and it wants to be able to just offer you the option to grab it off your hard drive next time.
Seriously.
However, the details of that credit card could be stolen if you sell your used Xbox. Right? So if someone else just has physical access to your Xbox for some reason. So we have links to a couple of stories here about, hackers can easily steal your credit card info when you sell your used Xbox. And then there's a follow-up that discovered that even if you do a reset to factory defaults on your Xbox, the credit card data isn't actually erased.
Oh, well, wow.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, what do I deban that sucker or something?
I think, yeah. So basically, your option is if you want to sell your used Xbox, you should probably deban the hard drive first. Although I don't know what you have to do to get the Xbox to work again after that.
Well, and the drive is stored in some sort of proprietary dock connector thing. It's not like you can just hook it up to a machine.
Well, I thought Xbox used a SATA connector.
I think it does inside that case. I think it's just a standard drive with a SATA connector, but then it goes to a... So the connector of the drive itself you can't use, but I think if you bust that thing open, there's just a standard laptop hard drive in there with a SATA connector.
I'm not sure. I don't own an Xbox, but you need to find some way to securely erase it if you want to sell your Xbox used.
And go beyond the factory reset. Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
Also, if you're taking your Xbox somewhere to get repaired, you might want to consider this same thing, right? If the repair shop going to steal your... I don't know if you have to get an Xbox repaired or whatever, but...
Now, Microsoft tossed out a response, right? Microsoft says it's not very likely.
Says that it's not very likely, but, are you going to go out... If you're a criminal, are you going to go out and spend a whole bunch of money on a used Xbox to maybe steal one credit card that might be expired? Or the user may have just never bought anything with a credit card.
Right. No, it's going to be if you pick something up and you're just going to check anyways. It's more casual, I would think.
Right, yeah. So it's not really that big of an attack, but Microsoft probably shouldn't be storing your credit card details on your Xbox like that.
Well, especially after you wipe it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you reset to factory
default, doesn't cover that, I don't think. But even if it did, it's not going to securely overwrite it, right? So it's...
Right. Should I jump to this interview with the NASA hacker, Jeremy Parker?
Yeah.
All right, so this story, I'll just cover a quick one. I'll link to it if you guys want to read the full thing, but we've talked a lot about NASA and their recent hack issues, and this guy is one of them who was involved. Jeremy Parker, who just got sentenced to 24 in June of last year, got sentenced to 24 months of prison for wire fraud, the result of a plea agreement wherein Parker admitted he gained access to servers of subsidiary Digital River Inc. and siphoned approximately $275,000 into his personal account. He additionally broke into two servers operated by NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, which are responsible for recording oceanographic data from orbiting satellites. It's a good Q&A interview. Here's an interesting one, though. I just had it right here marked. He said... They asked him, what got you busted? Which I thought was kind of interesting. He said, what originally alerted Digital River to my presence was a botched MySQL statement that modified a column of every account on the system when I was only trying to modify the column on a single user account. So one little mistake like that alerted him to his presence. And I
remember... I could do a war story about a friend of mine who forgot a where clause in his SQL statement and overwrote every user's data with the one user who was trying to edit.
Oh, man. So, yeah, he's in jail.
Destroyed his company's entire database.
He only got 2 years, but he talks about, too, in here about how the laws don't really work because, for example, the hacking he did against NASA was more like, I figured out they had this problem. I wanted to demonstrate to them they had this problem, and then I was going to show them how to fix this problem, and I still got arrested and was charged with, and he's in federal prison now. And he's like, some of the things they used against me just don't really work. And I wasn't trying to be malicious. I mean, I was trying to make a buck.
Yeah, the one stealing $250,000.
That's straight up
wire fraud. That's straight up wire fraud.
Yeah, he's busted there. For. Hey, man. Hey, yeah. I'm not trying to say he shouldn't go to jail. I'm just saying he did have some interesting points in there. But good read overall. All right, now let's talk about ACTA, because this thing unfortunately has not gone away, and it's getting closer and closer, though I don't think it's too late. This is coming from AskScope.com, and the reason why I wanted to cover it on the show is because this was highlighted by our TechSNAP subreddit, and they mention in here that a final vote will be going through the European Parliament in June of this year, approximately June 11th, or between June 11th and the 14th. If ACTA gets passed by a vote in the European Parliament, then it'll effectively, then all these agreements and all these nations will start to go into effect. However, if it dies there, in a very real way, ACTA will also be stalled out, much like SOPA and PIPA are, because without it passing there, I don't believe all of these trade agreements go into effect. So this is a pretty critical thing, and there's a great article over here that covers some of the existing response that people have had and some of the existing protests, what people can do. This is really something that is now in the hands of our UK brothers and sisters across the pond, and it's time that they get serious about this and stop it there, and hopefully it'll help stop it here too. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm only asking because when I look at what the world's turning into, I just this morning was able to re-upload the faux show video that got pulled off of YouTube. Did you see this?
No, I didn't.
So last night, Angela did episode 84 of Faux Show, and we covered popular trolling videos on the web, and they were clips off of YouTube, right? And we showed some of them in the show, and YouTube is blocking the video in basically the entire world. There's like a country that's available in that nobody watches. And so our content got pulled down, so I deleted it and re-uploaded it because it flagged it was something that actually seemed like a false positive. I re-uploaded to YouTube, and it was blocked again, and now I'm going through the process of asking for them to reconsider. But if they determine that it's just me abusing the reconsider system, they'll actually disable the Jupiter Broadcasting YouTube account over this. It's all because of these automated systems that scan for copyrighted material and try to act in the best interest of the rights holders, and it's all automated, and it shows you how much they really don't care about the independent publisher, because some company has some sort of checkbox where they can go through and say, flag everything that has our stuff in there, and then these bots misidentify something, our stuff gets pulled, and it just really sucks. And if things like ACTA are passed, that's going to be the future of the net everywhere. So I'd like to try to kill that thing before it gets too far. You know what I'm saying? All right, Alan, I think we've reached the end of the show, yeah?
Yep.
All right, dude, great show. Episode 52, the year mark, right here without missing a beat. It's in the can. Right there, everybody. All right, well, TechSNAP is live over jblive.tv at 1 p.m. Pacific on Thursdays, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Boom. There you go. Alan just did a little time math for you guys. And of course, we release it for download just by any format you could ever want. And I want to say thanks to the chat room for joining us here for the 1-year episode and streaming their thoughts live into our brains while we stream video live into their eyeballs. So that's kind of a nice agreement we have with everybody. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning to this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.